We are back in Unity, and now let's see if we can add a style sheet to this project. So we have again a open project without any visual elements in UI Builder. And now the first thing that we want to do is add at least one visual element. Although technically we could have done this after adding the style sheet. This is totally independent. But now generally, where is your style work happening? Your style sheets are basically happening over here in this little window that is apparently not really very prominently in here, but there's a lot of stuff that you actually do here, and we will see that in a second. But now, how to add an actual style sheet to this project? This, what we have to do is you have to press this small little plus button here, and you could either create a new USS file or add an existing one. Now we don't really have any files here, so we could go and create a USS file here, or what we can also do is to go into our project folder that we are currently in, then go create UI toolkit and style sheet. And now let's call this, for example, test style sheet. Don't need the file ending. And now when we go on this plus button and go on existing USS style sheet, we go into our project folder, we can choose that. And now we added a style sheet. Now, by default, a style sheet does have this one visual element here. I don't know if this is a sort of bug or if this is really intentional. Now, in the same way as we could inspect our UXML file down here as a read-only version, we can also inspect our USS file now. And the file that you're actually inspecting is this one style sheet, because as opposed to the in UXML, you basically have always one main hierarchy, and this is your file. For the style sheets, you can have several of those. Now, let's see. We can see basically everything that is in this style sheet for now, which is this empty one visual element without any styles applied to it. We don't actually need that, so let's just remove this this one visual element, and now we can see our style sheet is clean and empty. And so now, in order to actually do something useful with this style sheet, we have to provide our rules. And so let's add a class selector for the beginning. Let's say we will have a, let's just call this test. Generally, I don't like to call too many things tests, but let's start with it because I don't have any better ideas for now. So we have a test class, and you can see it immediately appears down here. And now we are selecting this test class basically in the same way as we would select a visual element. So you can see when we press on the visual element in your inspector, the visual element is selected and all the rules apply to this visual element. The same thing happens when we select a class and change something on the class, then this applies only to the currently selected class. So let's try to actually set some styling for this class. Let's say we want to have a squared element. So we give this a width and height of 100 pixel. And let's say we want this to have some color like this. That would be something like, no, okay, I'm not going to guess color names. Okay, and now we can see, so what are we doing here? We're basically creating a squared red box. So now we have a better name for this class. Let's just rename it and say red, come on, red square, like that. So you can see our class is visible down here. All the changes we made are set and saved into the file. And now to actually see this in action, we have our visual element here that is currently not having any styling. We didn't touch this yet. And now all we have to do is to drag this class and, for example, release over our visual element, and you can see the styling is applied to this visual element. We also have a different way to apply the class when we create a second visual element, which again has no styling. We can take the class and just drop it over the element on the canvas, and you see we get the same effect. And since both elements have the same class applied, they have exactly the same styling. Let's now add a third element to our layout here, because, I don't know, you should always have one or three, right? You should never have two elements. And so now all of our three elements have the same class applied. And now let's see what happens when we apply a second class to one of those elements, because we say, okay, maybe we want all of those elements to be red boxes, but for one element, for example, for the middle element here, we would like it to have rounded corners, for example. So let's say we will make a new class. Now we know how to name this, rounded corners. You see this one little sort of bug, this window that appears here about selectors. We will talk about this later, but I'm having a hard time to get this to disappear. Actually, I'm guessing this is something that the UI Toolkit team will work on. The way you can get rid of this is you have to really delete everything in this line and then click somewhere else, and then the window disappears. So let's now actually set our rounded corners on this class. We have to go to border, border radius, and give it some border radius. Now we will look in more detail on those properties. Don't worry about that. This is just to have something that we can actually see. And now we will probably have a little bit of a hard time to see this because they are kind of stacked together. So let's take our red class and give them a tiny margin for the bottom. Let's say 10 pixels. Yes, that's better. And now what we can do is we can select our rounded corners class, drag it over the middle element, and you can see we have rounded corners. For some reason, those two elements are having a border. Now, I just made a shortcut on those videos to figure out what was happening, and you are sometimes getting some small little bugs when you add new elements, and they're really not really reproducible, but they're not really a big issue. Now, we had you had those borders on those bottom two elements. Maybe you didn't have them in your version. I had them, and the only thing that I had to do is go into border, and actually, although it was actually stating that it has a 0 pixel border, I had to explicitly put in a 0 here, and then those borders disappeared. This happens sometimes. I'm also afraid that is a little bug, but it does not really destroy anything. You just have to sometimes do one more step. So I'm sorry about that. That was not intentional, and I'm not having any control over those things. I'm sure that in one of the next versions, those kind of bugs will start to disappear, and those things will still work the same way that we are working on them now. However, let's not get distracted by those small little issues. Our basic idea was to have our square classes on the first and the third element, and our rounded corners class on this middle element. And you can see it works beautifully. We have one element that is having all the properties from the red square class and also the properties from the rounded corners class. And obviously when I add this class to one other element, it also follows the same rules now. And I hope that you can maybe see where this might lead you. Now you can basically in your classes define what sort of styling you want to have. Elements that should have rounded corners, just take this class, drop it on the element, and it will have rounded corners. Elements that should have a certain color, take the class, drop it on the element, And you can infinitely create infinitely complicated stylings in your classes, basically, and drop them on your elements. We can see again when we take a look at our file that the way that this is stored is you are basically having one entry for a class, and they are just appended one after the other. This is the entry for our red square class, and above it is the entry for the rounded corner class. And obviously every class you add, it will just be appended here, and those are just the rules of your inline styles in text in code form, basically. So what do we do when we want to remove a class? Let's say you did something that you actually didn't like. Let's say we don't want this element to have rounded corners anymore. What you have to do is you go into this style class list section here, or generally under the style sheet section, and here you can find all your classes, and here you can also remove your classes. So we wanted to remove the rounded corners, so let's just do that, and now you can see this element again does not have rounded corners. We can also do the same thing on the middle element, and now they are all back to the initial styling that we had with the first class.